We're just giving this a minute. It takes a while for Zoom to catch up with everybody who's coming in from the waiting room. Okay, we'll get started. So we had this idea to do this webinar because we've been getting a lot of questions about maximizing an away rotation or a sub-I. And it's really hard to know, I think, when you're a student, what is it that people value and what can I do to be really great? And there's not a lot of time when you're in it to figure it out. So we put together this this panel, and we have sort of representation from all over, and it's going to be a discussion. I will monitor the chat, so I encourage you to ask questions in the chat. We have Greg Pearson, who is the program director at OSU. Sarah Lyon, who's a resident at Madison. Rebecca Naxat, who just graduated from CCF and will be staying to do a micro fellowship. Allison Snyder Warwick, who is at WashU, who is the upcoming program director there. Anna Ting is finishing her 4th year at Stanford, and when she finishes is interested in doing micro. Amber is at Irvine, right? California. We're all over the U.S. So I'll just start with a general question for the panelists. Like, what sort of first impressions matter to you when somebody is coming in? What do you notice those first few days that either impress you or you think, okay, this is going to be a long month? Greg, you want to start? I see you're not muted.
Yeah, thank you. You know, I think it was funny. I asked one of my residents I was working today, said, you know, I'm doing this presentation about sub-Is. He goes, it's really tough to be a sub-I because it's challenging because you want to seem interested, but I think the turnoff can be being too eager at times. And so I think kind of getting a good sub-I can get a feel for the room or the person they're working with. I know some of my partners are very talkative in the OR and some are very quiet. And if you kind of read that room wrong and you're really talkative with someone who's naturally a little quiet, it kind of turns them off, or vice versa. And so I think that ability, it's kind of not something you can really teach. It's not like, study for the case and know the anatomy and stuff like that, but kind of realizing that. And I think talking to the residents a little bit beforehand is helpful to kind of set that first impression with an attending.
I think that's really great advice, Greg. And it's something that I think all of the faculty really appreciate, how much pressure and stress you guys are under in this situation where you're trying to impress us. And we know that you want to make a good impression. So I think a lot of us are willing to be flexible with you. The thing that and sorry, my cat, of course, is immediately going to make an appearance. So sorry for the yowling in the back. But I think the thing that I noticed the most initially is how the sub-I integrates with my residents, because I think it's a less pressure environment. You know, they're not trying so hard to impress these people, but we definitely want someone who's going to get along with our team. And so seeing how that sub-I connects with their team is really helpful to me, and one of the first things I noticed.
I think we were all on the same wavelength here, because my thought was team player and someone who looks like they want to integrate with the team, even though we all appreciate how difficult it is to kind of start off and to get a feel for that team and how you can best help with that team and contribute to the team. But definitely having the intent to be helpful is really important, and not just trying to be the standout, on a pedestal by themselves. So really just being a team player, I think, is important.
Yeah, just echoing what everyone else said. I think that as a sub-I, you always want to impress everyone with how smart you are and how well read you are. And you want to ask maybe a couple questions in the OR, but sometimes people just want to talk about their weekends, and that's okay. They just want to hear if you went to a good restaurant, or if you like went out to a good bar, or what your Airbnb's like. And you almost feel uncomfortable just being a normal person. But in our chief room, when we interview residents, the staff always ask us, were they a normal person? Is it someone that you want to do a deep with for 16 hours? And that's really important.
I'm trying to, Sarah, what do you think?
Yeah, I was going to say I completely agree with what everyone else had said, and from the resident perspective, I think the sub-Is who arrive and are like, "I'm here," it's the sub-Is who tend to kind of be patient with getting to know the team, getting to know where they can be helpful, and we understand that sometimes can take a couple days and maybe even a week or so to sort of feel that out. So I would say be patient, and look for opportunities. They will come up and say, maybe I could teach this medical student something, or maybe I could get this dressing ready for rounds that has been missing for the last 2 days. And look for those small opportunities where you can be helpful, and then people will know that you're engaged and you're wanting to help. And I would also say that, your interactions with the residents and with any ancillary person involved in the program are really important and can make a big impression about you and how you interact with the greater team.
I would like to add one more point, and what I think a lot of students don't understand is the actual first impression that is frequently made on the program is how you interact with the program coordinator or the person who is setting up your sub-I, and how you treat that person, because they're the ones that funnel to the attendings and the residents and all that stuff. And so, you can kind of start yourself off on the right foot by treating that person very well, or you can start yourself off on the wrong foot by being kind of rude and pushy to that person. Because I can tell you right now, it's always going to get back to the program director how the sub-I interacted with the staff before they even show up.
Yeah, sorry, okay. You'll not get through this webinar season without seeing my daughter, Sarah.
That's a positive.
Periodically come in. She could probably give these now, but anyway, so my apologies for that. But but the other thing that I think is really hard for visiting medical students is, how can you be helpful? I think they all want to be helpful, and then you come in this new system and everybody sort of has a role already. And so what are ways that students can really help out the team?
I can start this off and just say that I did a couple of different sub-Is and at different institutions, and what each team needed was really different. For example, at UW-Madison, we don't have students write notes. And sometimes students struggle a little bit with that because they want to be helpful and they want to do that. But I would say accept what the residents are saying in terms of, don't do that, or, do this. So don't try to necessarily fight that. If they're telling you to go home and, get some sleep, then do that. They're not trying to trick you. And like I kind of said before, what strategy worked for me was to be patient and look for opportunities in each individual team. If there's a discharge summary that's, needing to be done for a patient that's going to be going home, and you're writing notes on that service, then why don't you maybe try drafting that, or try to get dressings ready, or do a post-op check on your patient to show that you're following them up. So those are sorts of things that I think go a long way for students.
I think also just reaching out to one of the junior residents and asking what you can do is helpful. At CCF, we don't have med students pre-round, but where I was a med student, I went to Medical University of South Carolina. We, as medical students, pre-rounded. So every school has a very, very different expectation. And if you're expected to pre-round and you haven't seen the patient already, you kind of look bad on rounds. So just send an email to one of the juniors, one of the other interns, and just ask what you should do and how you can be most helpful.
And to kind of build off of that, coming in prepared can be really helpful. So even before the rotation starts, you can reach out to people so that you're not starting kind of behind and adding more to like the Monday morning when everyone's kind of getting ready and trying to get everything started for the day. And then really being observative, if someone makes a comment like, oh, it would be nice if such and such, or, something as simple as organizing the dressings bag can be super helpful and really facilitate rounds. If you notice that some patient is never pre-medicated in time for the dressing to come down on rounds, just picking up that phone, asking to speak to the nurse taking care of so-and-so, and asking for the patient to be pre-medicated. Little things like that, you'll really be able to kind of pick up, and it can be really helpful to the residents as well.
There was
Yeah.
a question in the chat for people who are without programs. What should they do to prepare for their sub-Is? Because it may be their first substantial experience.
So I would say if you're from a program, home program that doesn't have a home plastic surgery, I would politely let the team know. I think sometimes students are afraid to say, I don't know. And that's not a bad thing. I say I don't know to my residents all the time when they ask me questions. Okay. And so I think sometimes saying, I don't have a home program, I'm obviously very interested in plastics, it sets the bar a little differently, and it lets them know some expectations about what you've been exposed to and what you haven't, and things like that. It's not a bad statement. I think being honest and saying, this is my first, sub-I, and I don't have a home institution, a home program at my institution, and let people know. Again, it comes back to what people have said is people want to get to know you, right? And if I'm just asking you about anatomy, that gets boring really quickly. But that gives someone an opportunity to talk to you and say, okay, well, what do you have at your program? What have you been exposed to? To me, that's an opportunity.
It's great advice. I think one of the other things, if you have the opportunity to pick the rotation sequence that you're going to do, is try and pick a couple of rotations in advance of your sub-I that give you some experience on a surgical service. So maybe that's trauma surgery, maybe that's surgical intensive care, maybe it's your internal medicine service, maybe that's a very busy service, but get a sense of what the flow of a round structure, needing to do dressing changes, needing to see patients, needing to be helpful to the residents, get a sense of what that's like, and really try and treat that as if it were a sub-I. And you'll learn a lot of things that'll be helpful to you that translate across multiple different experiences.
Definitely. And then I think, one key thing you're going to hear as a theme throughout this is communication. So, asking the team how you could be helpful. You heard that already. And I think when you arrive at a program, you can ask some good resources to help prepare for cases too, because you may not be as familiar with some of those that are specific to plastic surgery, and the residents can be really helpful in guiding you to prepare for that. And then you can maybe reach out to a chief resident or even, an attending and say, I saw that we had this case coming up and I just wondered if we could talk through it because I've never seen that before. And this is kind of what I was anticipating or what I was doing to prepare for it. Is there anything else you might suggest that would be helpful? I think people get really impressed when you plan ahead for something and you're trying to prepare.
There was a question in the chat. Any advice if there are 3 or 4 other rotators while you're on? And Amber, I loved your answer in the chat. I think it's dead on. And I think I actually think that it's a misunderstanding of the dynamic to think that if you're on a rotation with 3 other people, that you're all competing against each other and there's going to be one from that group, because you don't know there are going to be lots of other rotators, and you may be better off as being remembered as a medical student in a strong group of rotators than the best one in a group of rotators who really didn't have a lot of teamwork. But I'm interested in what the other people think about that.
Absolutely. If you're trying to sabotage your colleagues, nobody is going to want you to be a part of their team. So work together, and hopefully you can be on different cases or services at times, so you each get great learning experiences, but then you're also going to spend time together, and maybe that is on rounds, maybe it's on call, maybe it's just during educational conferences, but being able to be a team with your own colleagues and with those that are above you and below you is important.
Sarah, Anna, and Rebecca, how do you see it? Because you're sort of on the front lines when there are groups of several rotators. Do you feel it if there's competition, or do you notice it or are the students at your institution kind of separate?
Yeah, we at Cleveland Clinic, we have a big enough program that we try to separate our rotators as much as possible. But, like you said, in conferences and education, sometimes they're in the same room. And it's so apparent when there's someone who's trying to sabotage or undercut one of the other residents. And it's such a just really welcome scenario when you see them helping each other, or, just collaborating with each other, or talking through difficult cases with each other. So I think that you actually win by trying to collaborate and work with the other students than trying to outshine and be the best of the bunch, because you're all going to match somewhere. It's just might not be at that place. It might be at another great institution.
I would certainly echo that and say that it's definitely no secret when there is, some competition among rotators. My advice is to keep in mind, as was already mentioned, that these are going to be people who are a part of your professional career for the long haul. And so these people, will be around, and you want to try to build bridges with them going forward, sort of for the long haul. And then I would recommend that you try to communicate with them, with people or with your fellow rotators early on, and say, hey, I'm planning to go to, I'd like to go to this case. If you come in, maybe we could, tag team. You would do a little suturing, I would do a little suturing, or something like that, so that you open lines of communication, so that, you're able to divvy up some responsibility a little bit more, or maybe tag team on rounds and say, hey, I'll get these dressings if you want to pre-prep, some of the notes, and then we could get it done together. At the end of the day, you're a team. And if you're able to get things done more efficiently together, that is amazing. And you both will look great.
I agree with everything that's been said. We at Stanford will sometimes get 3 or 4 rotating sub-Is at the same time. We do have enough cases to go around so that in the OR, usually you're the only medical student or rotating sub-I. That being said, when you are with other rotators, it's even more important to be a team player, because ultimately, when you join a residency, you are on a team of, at least sometimes 3 or 4 other residents. And, it's so much more important for you to be helping everyone else, including your co-sub-Is, because that's kind of foreshadowing how you'll play, how you'll kind of play a role in your future residency.
I can honestly say I probably remember maybe 5% of the answers that people give me in the OR of like the questions that I that I ask. But I do remember if somebody is like helpful, or if they're trying. There was a really good question in the chat about kind of feeling like an outsider in a team. That a team may have a style, and they're a cohesive group, and maybe they're making a lot of inside jokes. And how do you navigate? What's the best way for somebody to navigate that, to not overstep your your bounds, but to make it clear, like, I could be in your group. I could be a part of your inside jokes.
My advice on this is because I know that feeling and that can be awkward, and just kind of be patient with the scenario. And I would say, don't try to be over eager in terms of inserting yourself into conversations that maybe the residents are having, that, if they were in a case together, and, let those conversations happen. And if there's a natural way for you to kind of enter into the conversation, or if they bring you in, then take that chance, and it'll become more organic. But when people try to kind of force that, it can feel artificial. So my best advice is, although it can be sometimes difficult, just be patient and look for the small opportunities to kind of build rapport over time. That's the most impressionable, I think.
I also think that you can tell a lot about residents by the way they treat medical students. And I think that if you feel like on 4 weeks, people are just over and over not including you, not making you feel like you're part of the group, it might not be a good fit for you. And that's okay. Part of the, goal of sub-Is is to find places where you do fit and where you don't fit. So, exactly what Sarah said, don't push it, but also you want a place where you're going to be happy, and you don't want to feel like an outsider if that's the environment that they're, offering for you for 6 years.
Yeah, and what
For
I was
sure.
you just do you, because you are going to be who you are. And, if you don't fit in, then maybe that is potentially for the best. And there will be other opportunities where you will be able to join in on a conversation. And so that kind of echoes the previous comment of, be patient. Not every team is going to fit for everyone. And opportunities will arise.
And it's okay to feel a little bit like an imposter in those situations. I think everyone on this panel will tell you that they've experienced imposter syndrome at some point, and that may be a manifestation of you feeling like you're not worthy or ready to be a resident. And it's okay, that's a normal feeling. You don't have to be making jokes with a team to prove that you're worthy or ready. We all remember what it's like to feel there.
You have to also remember that some of these residents have been together, 3 to 5 years together. I mean, like one of my 6s and one of my 4s are incredibly good friends. They golf like every chance they get, And so if they're on a service together and you're making rounds, they're going to have some jokes that probably aren't even related to patient care. And they're not, they're not expecting you to get that. But you have to understand that we've stressed this idea of a team, and everyone wants like a cohesive team that gets together, gets along. And that kind of, sometimes them having some of these inside jokes is because they've been around each other for 3-4 years and know each other well.
There's a question, what do you do if your rotation is just 2 weeks?
We offer 2-week rotations at UW-Madison, and I would say I wouldn't fret about the time. The time is the time, and it's not something that you can control. So I really would say I wouldn't approach it too differently. That you want to kind of put your best foot forward and be available for opportunities on call. And if there's a chance to come scrub in for a case on a weekend, and you're taking call, go for it. And but I would say, that's something that's not in your control. So I wouldn't worry too much about it. I would keep your same strategy.
We are fortunately getting a ton of questions, so I'm trying to keep up. I'm going to skip a couple because there's one that I want to listen to what the panelists have to say. What advice do you have if you're in a situation where you feel like I'm trying to be a team player, but there is somebody who is sabotaging me?
I think most often that'll be apparent and you're not going to have to bring it to light. But the residents that you're working with closely will probably have the most insight into that and see it. And, you know, if not, if you felt comfortable saying that, I think you could bring it to light. But I think in almost every circumstance, it's going to be very obvious and you don't have to be the one to showcase it.
So there's a question in terms of, I'm going to combine two of the questions. So the best month, are there best months to rotate? And then because the recommendations are to only do one rotation, what do you do about places that in normal times you would have done a rotation? How do you connect with them and let them know that you're interested?
I mean, I think any month in advance of the interview invites going out is a good month to do your away rotation. There isn't like rotators in July are more preferable than ones in August. That never really matters to us. It's hard. Sometimes students want to rotate after the date that the interview invites have gone out, and that's very difficult because we can't, you know, gauge their performance when we make those invitations. And then let's see, what was the other aspect of the question?
Reaching out to other programs that you don't get to
Oh,
hold.
yes, thank you. I was like, I had a thought and it already escaped me. Fortunately, so much of our conferences are on Zoom right now. I think just reaching out to the coordinators and asking if you can attend some of their lectures, if people are doing virtual meet and greets and things like that, just attending those things, I think is really helpful.
So I think there's a little bit of a farce about how much people could reach out to programs before. In general, people could only do 4 sub-Is. You know, back in when I thought, and Deb and I have talked about this, people were doing too many sub-Is. And so like, yeah, you might only be doing 1, but it's not like before when we didn't have all the technology of having people attend our you know, conferences virtually and stuff like that. Like you actually have the opportunity to reach many more programs than people that used to do a lot of sub-Is, because when people did a lot of sub-Is, you didn't have any other contact. You did your 4 sub-Is, your 3 sub-Is, and the other programs you just applied to. And I think nowadays with the technology, you actually have more exposure. And so I wouldn't fret that, oh, I can only do 1 sub-I and people used to do 3. That's only 2 more institutions. And odds are you're going to apply to all of them anyways. So, you know, I don't think that would be something that like it threatens like your thought process about this. I think it's just a fact of life. Think about the cost savings.
There's a question, is coming in both weekend days a general sub-I expectation? That may be program specific.
Yeah, I think in my experience as a sub-I, it was at the clinic, and I'm sure this is like this at other institutions too. We typically have 4 students at a time. So they're assigned one weekend and that's their weekend, and they're expected to come in that weekend, help out with cases, help out with rounding, but they're not expected to come in the other weekend. That's another student's time to shine. And honestly, if you try to like come in and help get numbers or something, it's just going to be viewed as negatively. So really just, you know, do what you're asked to do if you are assigned it, and don't try to appear too much like a eager beaver in that situation. Just take the time off and enjoy it.
When should students reach out to faculty or the program director during their rotation? Should they reach out early and try and meet with them early, or should they wait until near the end, or both?
I personally like to do a little bit of both because our rotations are structured across a couple different clinical experiences. There's a chance that I might not have a ton of face time with an applicant or with a rotator. And so if they set up a quick meeting with me at the beginning of the rotation to say, this is who I am, and I'd be interested in getting a letter of recommendation at the end if the rotation has gone well, then that reminds me, I need to like make sure that I spend some specific time with them, that they're interested in having that. And then I like to have a sit down kind of exit interview with them after after the rotation is done. But I would say setting that expectation early can actually be really helpful.
Yeah, there are a lot of questions coming through about letters of recommendation, and so I posted in the chat. This will come up again. We will talk a lot about letters of recommendation, but just for this panel, and I'm going to approach it from kind of a different way by synthesizing all of these questions and then kind of reframing them. But when you get, what sort of, how do you like to be approached, and what sort of students are you just really excited to write? Like, what sort of students have you already composed the letter of recommendation before they've even asked you? Greg, I'm going to call on you.
Yeah, I think no, that's a great question. I mean, obviously, I mean, 90% of the time when students do sub-Is, they're going to ask for a letter of recommendation. So it's not like this. If it's a surprise to an attending, like we as attendings need to be more astute of what's going on, right? And so I like it shouldn't come as a surprise to anyone. So but I think you know, just I personally like it's kind of program specific. Like for us, I think it's important to tell our student coordinator, because if a student comes and says, I really want a letter from Greg or Amy Moore or this or that or Jeff Janis, she'll try to make it so that that student spends more time with that faculty member, because we have a big team and the students kind of go here, there, and everywhere. And so letting that person know if that's how the things are scheduled, if it's the residents that kind of make the schedule, letting them know, hey, look, I'm trying to really get a letter from someone else, you know, from so-and-so, so they can help you get that scheduled time. And I think meeting with the faculty member early, again, introducing yourself and you know, saying something to the extent of, you know, give them an in or an out. And what I mean by that is say, if this rotation goes well and you feel comfortable, would you write me a letter of recommendation at the end, you know, or something? Would you consider? Leave it as open-ended. And for me, it goes back about writing a letter of recommendation. It goes back to knowing the person. And I can't remember who said about if you're going to want to spend 16 hours doing deep flaps. I don't do deep flaps, thank God. But for me, it'd be like a vault reconstruction. You know, am I going to want to spend 5 hours? And it's that ability to talk about what you did on the weekend, what kind of food you like. Again, there's only so many anatomy questions I can ask, and that gets really boring. But you know, we want to know each other as people. I mean, we all want to make that connection. And so those are the type of students I want to write a letter that I'm not just reading off their CV and say they went here, they got this grade, they got that grade. I want to be able to say, you know, this person has a great sense of humor or a quick wit or this or that, you know, and add some, what I think, some personal touch to it. Those are the kind of letters of recommendation I want to write. So that I've said enough.
I totally agree. And as someone who also reads the letters of recommendation when you're getting all these applications for residency, those are the parts that really stand out. What are your, you know, true personality defining characteristics, and you know, what's your work ethic like? And it's very nice to see what your academic record has been, but it's the part about finding the match for the program, of the person to the program and the program to the person. Those things are what's really important, because the end, everyone will be happier if it's a nice match for you.
For Sarah, Rebecca, and Anna, have attendings come to you and said, oh, I'm writing a letter for this student, what are your thoughts? Are you approached to contribute content to letters that maybe don't have your name on them? But
yeah, our program director sends an email actually to every single resident for every single med student and gets all the feedback. So I'm sure he has a million emails to read, but you know, even your interactions with interns or second year students, it's, you know, it's not just the chief you're trying to, you know, impress and work well with, it's the, you know, all residents across the board. So yes, all of the residents' input gets put into the letters.
Agree.
I ask for the residents' opinion personally.
They do have a good perspective, and there is a lot of worry, I think, with letters of recommendation. Like you want a letter of recommendation from somebody who is very well known, who has influence in plastic surgery. But you can't always predict the influence. There are people who are very well known who, maybe the person who's reading the letter doesn't get along with that person, and just dismiss it. So you're always better off with an authentic letter that can really capture. The letter is about you. It's not about who's writing it. So if the person can really capture you on the page, then it'll be meaningful and impactful. Someone posted in the chat. Now, we don't do this, but that the program that they're doing, their sub-I told them that the exit interview will be your residency interview. Is that a common practice, and how do the panelists feel about that?
I can comment on that. That's something that is done here at UW. As a student, I think my perspective, and I had rotated at Madison as a student, and there's sort of two sides to that. One is that I was grateful because it sort of saved me an extra trip back to that city, and saved me allowed me to interview at maybe a different program on that day, and saved me the time and money for that. But on the other hand, I was somewhat nervous that, what if they forget about me, and that was a long time ago, and they're going to meet all these new people. And I think what I've learned since being a resident is that the impressionable sub-Is certainly are not forgotten, and so I wouldn't worry about that part. And so if that's the program style, again, that's the program style, and I think they're doing it out of trying to be respectful to you, and not making you travel back again.
That's such a nice framing of it. Like, I would, if I were the sub-I in that, I would be like, oh my gosh, now there's all this pressure. But it's a really nice framing to think, no, it's actually the program, like, trying to give you more options and saying, like, look, let's just save you some time. I think another thing that's come up is students have to turn down sub-Is, and how does that affect their chances? And I'll just point out that feels new, but it's actually not new. It's been going on for years, that because of conflicts, people couldn't do sub-Is for a program that they really wanted to go to. So, but how can a student express their interest in a program that they couldn't do a sub-I at?
I mean, I think this year especially, programs are going to be incredibly understanding of that, because we all realize that you're limited to one rotation alone. And the other honest and not so pretty answer to that question is that I can hardly remember like where I left my shoelaces any given day. I can't remember who turned down a sub-I option with us. And so that's not something that even factors in for me.
So I agree and slightly disagree. And what I mean by that, it depends on how you turned it down. For example, it's okay. We all understand that you're putting bids out there, and it's a shuffle, and like at OSU we're like off cycle by a little bit, so it's hard for our students to get places, and so we all understand that. But I think what does frustrate like me is when my student coordinator will say, okay, we have this person coming this month, and these couple of people coming this month, and a person accepts it, and then they feel like they get a better fish, and then they say no. So I think it's different if you accept it and start making plans and then you cancel. That's a different beast than if you just had a bid and you never accepted it. And I'm not explaining it perfectly well, but to me that makes a big difference. Like once you accept it, your word should be your word and your yes should be your yes. You shouldn't say, oh, I got one at OSU, but now the Cleveland Clinic is calling. I guess I want to go there more. That's to me is a no-no.
Allison, how does it work for you at WashU?
Similar to Amber, I can't keep track of the people who turned down the sub-I rotation, but you certainly remember people who sort of put you in a bind or were rude about things. So I think, always be polite and, be thoughtful before you accept something, and be sure that's what you want to do. And then, when it comes time for interviews, if someone asks you about, well, if you like us so much, why didn't you rotate? Just be genuine with your answers, really, in anything you do with the interview. People are completely understanding that you can't have traveled, all over the US. And in fact, this year you'll just travel one place. And as Deborah mentioned, it's not a new problem that you can't go to every program and try it out, even though you may like to, but you just practically can't do that because you're also still a student at whatever school you're at, and you have rotations and coursework to do too. And there's a lot of other things that contribute. So I think, just being genuine is always a good policy.
I did a rotation at Northwestern because my parents live really close by, and like the truth, I mean, I loved the program. I thought it was great, but the main reason was I just wanted my mom to do my laundry for just a month.
Well, maybe you.
And so there are lots of different reasons.
And it's close to family.
So, so somebody asked the question, what if they're applying to plastic surgery, but they don't get a sub-I in plastics, but they get one in another surgical specialty, say vascular surgery? How should they navigate that?
I think it goes back to what we talked about with letters of recommendation. I'll stop talking, sorry. If you can get someone that, whether it be a vascular surgeon or a surgical oncologist or any other surgeon who says, it's a high quality person, I've got to know them well, and can speak to your personal attributes, that still is a much better letter than a well-known plastic surgeon that you could tell they just read your CV into that letter.
And there are letters, we get letters from other specialists that say, look, I wanted him to go into ENT and he's great. And I still wish that he would change his mind, but he wants to do plastics. And here's what's great about him. Here's why I wanted him to go into ENT. And those letters are also taken seriously. There is a question, and students, we in ACAPS, it's something that's a major ongoing discussion of what we can do about students who don't have a home program. So we have lots of initiatives to try and help those students, but I think this year the big thing is students without a home program, if they're trying to follow the AAMC recommendations and they only do one sub-I, does that hurt them? Because most students with a home program would essentially do two. They would do an away and they would do one at their home institution. Any thoughts on that?
I mean, I hope that we decide to let students do 2 rotations if they don't have a home program, but it's obviously still being debated.
I think regardless of kind of what happens too, I agree with that. I hope you can get more experience, just because it helps if you're really excited about the field and learn more about it. But I think regardless of what happens, people will not judge you one way or the other based on if you did 1 or 2. So, right now you're putting a whole lot of thought into sort of every movement and having strategy and calculation, and you're not going to be judged like that.
And I think to some degree, that's just the fact of the matter right now. That's just the reality that we live in. Hopefully it'll change. But there are also other ways of, I think, reaching out to programs and Some places have virtual sub-Is, so you don't need to travel. You just log in and like attend those conferences. There are other ways to get your face and yourself out there without having to actually do a sub-I.
There's a question, how do programs during interviews feel about geographic proximity to family being an important factor for being interested in the program? I've heard, and so the person writes, I've heard that you may not want to mention this because it makes it seem like you're overlooking the program's features, or is it something that they should bring up? I did not bring up that I wanted my mom to do my laundry.
I personally don't have a problem with people bringing that up. If you're a good candidate and you have a good application and good letters showing me that you have ties to the region or some additional reason that you want to be in our program, that's really helpful. We all know that residency is really hard. And so knowing that you have a support network around you can actually be something that makes it more likely that you'll succeed and do well.
100% agree with that. We want people to be happy and set up for success, and for some people that is being close to family. So I think it can be a real positive thing. For others, it's not. So it's very individualized.
There was a study, and I forget where it was published, but it was in General Surgery, and it was looking at attrition. And the interesting finding was they found that attrition rates in general surgery were higher when people lived in areas where they were close to family, and they couldn't figure it out. Like, is it because their family is like, oh yeah, no, quit, we'll be here for you. but one of my co-residents, was his parents lived like just a couple blocks away from the hospital, and that's probably what got him through residency.
Very individualized. So hopefully you figure out what is helpful for you.
And that might be something you can explore on your sub-I as well, if you get the chance to do a virtual rotation or do one of these like Instagram meet and greets with residents, kind of get a flavor of what the program is like and get a sense of if that's a question or something that you should bring up.
It's interesting, but if somebody brought that up to me, I have geographic ties, my family is here, or whatever. To me, what that would tell me about the person is more what their value base was than anything about the program. So that would be the way that I would interpret it. But that being said, I think that in the end, it is not going to be a dispositive factor for most programs.
I think you mention it, but don't lead with it. And what I mean by that is people want to hear that you're interested in their program for their microsurgery or their hand surgery or their this or that or their educational program. And that's what I meant by mention it, but don't lead with it. Some of our faculty have been off put when someone says, oh, why'd you apply here? Well, it's really close to my family. And that's the first thing you hear. Not that that's incredibly important. I mean, wellness and family are incredibly important. But it's not, that's why I say mention it, but don't lead with it. You say, well, Ohio State's a great program. I love the fact that you guys do X, Y, and Z. And then it will come out in your conversation. And so that's why I say mention it, but don't lead with it.
That's a really nice way to think of it.
Sorry. And then the last thing I was going to say is, on the flip side, if you don't have geographical ties like family or whatnot to the area, I think it is still important that you are happy in the geographical area you live in. So maybe that's hobbies, maybe that's weather, maybe that's something else that would then tie you to that area, just to show that it's like not just it's obviously the program first and foremost, the training that you're going to get that you're excited for, but also in this specific spot, it would be nice as well.
Yeah, like the Stanford campus would be a very nice place.
Yeah, I was
live.
gonna add, I think sometimes programs wonder if certain candidates would be happy living in whatever geographic area they're in. You know, if, for example, in the Midwest where we are in St. Louis, we don't have mountains or an ocean. And for some people that's, you know, not going to happen. But in the end, it's just, again, it's a match of personalities, and we want residents to be happy during their training and, you know, be healthy and have great wellness. And that's where the match part comes in. And I think is kind of what Anna was alluding to as well. And I agree, like, that's why I told Deborah, so you would say, I'm really interested in your program, and then mention family and leave out the laundry part, you know, program first, but then the other stuff is still, you know, we're all human beings and it's a part of life. And, you know, just making people may be aware that, you know, you like the surroundings of wherever you are, or you could like the surroundings. You would be interested in learning more about the surroundings.
And it's also, you know, you brought up a good point that there's a little bit of context to it. Like if somebody, and kind of to build on what you said, Greg, if somebody says, oh, I want to come here because, you know, I love Colorado and I love hiking and I love skiing, somebody may be like, okay, but you're not going to get to do a lot of skiing and hiking during residency. So, you know, it's nice, but your expectations about how much you're going to be able to really take advantage of everything that the region has to offer may be limited.
All very good points.
There's a comment that's sort of the flip side of us trying to get to know whether an applicant is a good fit, which is that it's hard for the applicants to get a sense of what the character of the programs are just from the websites, and the applicants don't have the advantage of letters of recommendation and, you know, other things. So how can they get a sense of whether the program would be a good fit for them, especially with all of the limitations?
Well, I think one advantage here is that plastic surgery is a relatively small field. So in general, when you reach out to people that you may have contacts with, they may have some knowledge of the programs, or they may know someone who has great knowledge of that program. And then I think it was mentioned a little earlier too, that, you know, now there are often some virtual opportunities to get a feel for programs. And so attending some of those might give you an idea of what the program really emphasizes or specializes in, or you might have the opportunity to ask people at that program.
Before interviews,
Friends
oh,
with
there.
the people. Go ahead.
I was just going to say before interviews, especially sometimes program coordinators will send out who you're interviewing with the day before. I would quickly PubMed those people. It takes like 15 minutes. You throw them in PubMed and just put it, you know, filter search for the last 5 years and just see if there were research interests, you know, were there 10 articles on the face transplant or, you know, microsurgery outcomes. And that just gives you really good talking points for your interviews and also shows you what's important to that department, at least from a research angle.
I would also just quickly recommend that I found other students I was applying with to be very helpful resources in terms of gauging what programs are about, because they kind of have an unfiltered view. You know, programs obviously want to recruit you and, you know, are trying to put their best foot forward too. And so other students and your colleagues, you know, at the medical, like other medical students, can give you a really good peek into what a program's about. So another reason to kind of build those bridges and keep people close.
Yeah, and Amber's point about talking with the faculty at your home institution or, you know, other faculty, again, plastics is really small, and the faculty at your institution, they will have friends they will have trained at other places. They will have friends who went on to other places and they are still in touch with those friends. So there are so that personal connection will probably give you a real insight into what the program is like and what the culture is like. Amber, who was it who did sub-Is together?
I was just making a joke. I was like, probably the faculty at your program did sub-Is with the faculty at these other programs, just circling back to our other question. So clearly a bad joke.
It's true. I can say Allison and I were residents together. So yeah, people, things interconnect and circle back. Yeah, there is I'm going to put my email in the chat if anybody wants to reach out to me with any other questions. Hang on. So there's a question, how can students make a good impression while participating in virtual sub-Is, and how much of an impression can realistically be made?
Have your camera on.
And consistently, you know, if you're able to tune into conferences or, you know, grand rounds or indications for programs that you're interested in, and you tune into the, I don't know if they're doing an Instagram event or whatever, you know, those, when you have your camera on, you know, your face is, you know, it's a small world and we recognize you and we know that you're putting forth that effort and it doesn't go unnoticed.
I'm taking a class and the professor made a comment like, oh, I love teaching these graduate courses because the undergraduates never have their cameras on. and so yeah, it does. I want to be respectful of everybody's time. So with the couple minutes that we have left, can we just go around and have all of the panelists just give some final take-home points about how people can really excel and make the most of being a sub-I? Some practical advice.
When I was a student at UChicago, one of the chief residents told me to keep your head down and keep your head up at the same time. And I thought that was great advice. Just work hard, but stay positive, and that will go a long way.
I would just say that sub-Is are really hard and it's very stressful. You always feel like you're messing up and making bad impressions and not doing what you should be doing. But realistically, just try your best. And I'm sure that you're making a good impression. And at the end of the day, have fun. You're in a different city. You're interacting with different people that you might not get to interact with again. It should really be a fun 4 weeks. So try to enjoy it, and everyone else will be able to tell you're enjoying it too.
I was going to have fun, but that's already been said. I did 3 or 4 sub-Is when I was applying, and it was the best, like 4 months of my life. You get to see so much of plastic surgery, meet so many cool people. So really enjoy it, cherish it, remember it well, you know, work hard, come prepared, be enthusiastic, and be yourself.
And I would say have faith and grace for yourself too. I think that it's really stressful. You're so worried that you're gonna like make the right impression at the right program and match into the right place. And that's going to determine the course of your entire life. But the thing that will determine the course of your entire life is how you manage the situations that you end up in. So whatever program you match at, do a good job there. You will manage to make the best of any situation that you end up in if you have a good attitude and you do the work, and that'll show.
I typed it in the chat earlier, just be your authentic self. And why that's important is because you don't want to portray yourself as something you're not and then match to a program that actually doesn't fit you. Because you know, it's easy to be on the side, say it's stressful. We understand it's stressful. We don't fully get it. I mean, it's that this is your reality and that's how it is. But just be yourself. It's hard to do, but that's what's going to make the program know that you're a fit for them and you know, vice versa. And so that's the most critical thing, I think.
All very, very good advice. It's hard to add anything else to that, but I think for me, the most important things are to be genuine, you know, be yourself and stay positive. No one wants to be around someone who's negative all the time. So I like what you said, Sarah, about head down and head up at the same time. But honestly, like positivity is contagious and so is negativity. And you want to be on a team of people who are happy. And so to add to that, I just say also be kind. With everyone that you interact with in the hospital, it takes you a long way because people will be willing to help you out and you're going to need help. And so just being helpful to others and being kind is important with all those other things everyone said.
More than one student has torpedoed their chances at our institution by being really kind with the attendings in the room. But when the attending breaks scrub and they're with either like a PA or someone that's not an MD and they change their tune, it's like you're done. You know what I mean? And like that going back to what you were saying about being kind, it's critical.
I would even add that it's for anybody who students perceive isn't a power broker. Like there have been people who are super nice and like very engaged when the program director is operating, and then there's a junior faculty and they're like, oh, okay, well, I'm not so interested because this person can't really do much for me. And the truth is that person can do a lot for you. A lot of times it's those people who have a lot of influence. Well, thank you. We're like 3 minutes over, but thank you to all of the panelists. This was, I wish I could go back and be a sub-I again with this advice.
You just want your mom to do the laundry again.
Yeah. But, and to everyone who has joined, thank you so much for coming. This will be posted if you want to rewatch parts, and you have our addresses, our email addresses. So feel free to reach out. I think everybody people do this because they really want to help. So so we want you all to have great experience. Have a great experience, not only in your sub-Is, but also applying to plastic surgery, because we love the field and we want other people to too. All right.
Nice everyone here. Good luck.
Good night, everyone.
Have a great night.
Stay safe, everyone. Thank you. Thanks, Dev.
Thank you. Bye.
Have a great night.